All right, so we're going to cover our most common issue that comes up when water softeners aren't softening the water and not working properly, not using salt. So it's usually almost always here in the salt tank. You'll notice you got a white, what we call a brine well in there. We'll remove the cap for you and show you what's down there. But you'll notice the water's up so high. I mean, it's all the way to this overflow elbow over here. So that means our safety float's engaged as well. We never want that float down in there to be touching the water, which is the most common issue and easily fixed. So our water's up very high. It's all the way up here, almost all the way to the top, and certainly to the overflow elbow here. So that's just way too much water. It's certainly touching our float. So it's an easy remedy. What you want to do is get that water down so it's at least 6 inches below the float in the brine well. That's key. That's the part that a lot of people want to skip, but the most important part, we got to get this excess water out of here and get the water at least 6 inches below the salt, the safety float here. So with that said, once you do that, how to test to make sure you did everything okay and that everything's working right, you're going to go and do a manual backwash over at the valve. Okay, so how we start this manual backwash is just push this diamond regen button in for about 5-10 seconds until we see the BW flash up on the screen. We're not going to be in the BW, we're actually going to skip ahead here. Once the minutes show up here, we can skip to the next step, which is where we want to be, which is the BD, the brine draw portion of the regeneration process. The brine draw is when it's going to suck the water out of the salt tank, and now that we got the water 6 inches below our float, it should draw the water out fine for us, but we just want to double check that that's working okay. So what the safety float looks like down at that white tube is just like this. So here's the safety float, the whole assembly, but the actual part we don't want touching the water is here. So this black portion right here is where we want to get the water at least 6 inches down below this float, just to ensure we have it low enough to get our brine draw working. So now that we have the time flashing up, we can go ahead and push that regen button again. It's going to skip ahead to BD, which is the brine draw. It's a 60-minute cycle. It's actually a 2-part cycle here. The first portion is the brine draw, where it sucks the water out of the salt tank, which is the most important part for a water softener to function. Without that salty water coming into the water softener itself, it cannot soften the water. So we want to give it about 15 minutes and then look down in the salt tank, make sure all the water's been drawn down, you know, to at least within 2 or 3 inches of the bottom of the brine tank. Once that portion is done, we want to let it finish out its whole cycle and go ahead and it will go to what's called the brine fill once that's done. So we can skip ahead. So now we have the RR showing on display, and we're going to let those minutes flash up here in just a second so we can skip ahead to the brine fill. Okay, so now the minutes are showing up here again, so we can go ahead and push that diamond regen button. This will skip us ahead to the brine fill position. This is where it's going to add the water back to the salt tank. So we want to let this part go all the way through to ensure that when it's done, it doesn't add so much water that it hits the float down that white tube. Remember, the float looks like this. We want to make sure when it adds the water, it does not come up so high that it hits our safety float here down in that brine well. If it drew all the water out and put water back in, but it's still below the float when it's all done, then more than likely you've solved the most common water softener problem there is, and you're probably good to go for quite some time. We hope you enjoyed this video by A+ Water. Again, if you have purchased from us, feel free to call us toll free at 1-877-477-5452. We love to help our customers. Okay, so hopefully everything drew down nice and neat for you and put in the right amount of water and didn't hit your safety float. But if it did not, we're going to go to the next thing we can troubleshoot here. So we're in that BD brine draw position, and it didn't draw down earlier. We're going to disconnect our brine line from our salt tank here. And we're going to stick this brine line, the line that comes right from the side there, we're going to stick it right down into the salt tank what's in BD. Now, if it starts to draw the water down when we're bypassing the float, then there may be an issue with the float. And once again, that should draw the water right down for you. And If it does draw the water down, then there's an issue. Possibly the flapper and the float has been stuck shut and preventing it from drawing the brine.